Well, with the Y, Sue and I were married.
You met after you moved to California, though.
Well,
So you moved, you got out of the Navy, you got out of school,
yeah.
you got out of the master's program.
It's now about 1952 or so.
Okay.
It was 56 when we were married. Trying to think now. George McLean was the executive at the Armed Services Y, and invited me to be a member of the staff there in Long Beach. So I moved to Long Beach in about 1952 and started to work there.
What was your first job out there?
The only job I ever had was program director.
Wow. So you hit the ground running.
I hit the ground, got that right, and became involved in what I was supposed to do. And I did it very well. I built the program. The old Armed Services building was located on Pier A in Long Beach, which was the beginning. The ships at that time had landing boats that would take the sailors ashore for their leave, and Pier A was their landing, and the Y was located at that Pier A, which meant we were first on their visit into town. And so we had a built-in clientele that was ever flowing through. The building had kind of a poor restaurant, or cafeteria. No, it was more of a cafe, and dormitories for sleeping, and locker space. Lockers were made available, rather, for their change of clothes from the sailor uniform to civilian clothes. And that was the chief income of the building. Lockers and beds, very reasonable priced commodity.
I think I remembered like $5 a night.
Oh, it was cheaper than that.
Wow.
I think $1 or $1.50. So I stayed there and then the building, we had a new building being built toward town at Seaside and Magnolia. The old building was on Seaside, and Magnolia was closer into town, and it was all new construction, and landing place for the ship's landing craft for the sailor's Liberty was also located at that place. So it was all built custom for that purpose. So in the new building is where I really had the joy of creating new programs and enjoyed it very much. We had a stage, not really a biggie, but more of a platform that we built into a fairly accommodating stage, and lights, theatrical lighting, and a small booth for the sound and lighting controls, all of which I had a part of designing, and that was fun for me because I could build program around the facility. It was a great place, and I stayed there for many years, And in the meantime, I met Sue, and Sue became my wife. We were married in about 1956, and had a lot of friends in that area who came to the wedding that was held at the First Congregational Church, where I used to sing with the choir there. And the church was located at 3rd and Cedar in Long Beach. And my sister, incidentally, was also married there years before to her husband, Bick, who was in the service at that time as well. I don't remember the year that she was married. And
so how did you meet Mom? She was a GSO girl?
well, she was part of the Girls Service Organization, GSO. And so being a red-haired person fell right into the category I liked. And my sister was a redhead, and so I liked that fact. And so anyway, we were married in Long Beach, stayed in Long Beach. I worked in Long Beach. So Long Beach was definitely the home. We had an apartment on Atherton Street for a while, and then later, much later, I don't know how long we stayed on Atherton, but let's see, you came along
59.
in 1959, so 56 we were married, and 59 you were born.
And you were already in the El Jardín house.
And then, yeah, in between 56 and 9, we found a house on El Jardín, which is a street in the eastern part of the city. Nice area of Long Beach. Was a good purchase property-wise. And near Wilson High School, where you went to school, and also Minnie Gant, which was grade school, and Hill, junior high. So, what?
All the kids went through that.
Yes. All 4 of our children did that same schooling.
So, Mom brought her entourage of girlfriends in the GSO. So, she was a big entertainer as well. Do you have any early...
Mother was an entertainer.
Or was that you?
No, she liked to do monologues.
Didn't you involve her in some of your productions?
Yeah, she was, this was much later. This is in the new building.
Yep.
I produced plays. Fantastics was one of the plays. Tea House of the August Moon was another. And I can't, let's see, what were the names of do you recall the names of the...
The one I remember most was, I think it was an original piece called Exit Laughing. When you retired.
Oh.
Called Exit Laughing.
Well, that's what I called it. I didn't write it.
Oh, okay.
Exit Laughing was when I was leaving the Y, and that's just a theatrical term.
Okay.
That...
You did skits.
Yes. A theatrical term, when you leave the stage, you want to exit laughing.
Okay.
And so I created a piece of theatrical thing that involved a lot of little small sketch material, like you would see on TV of what was the lady's name that was so fun?
Oh, Joanne Worley,
That and
Goldie Hawn.
Goldie Hawn, Joanne Worley. What was the big lady's name?
Big lady.
Not large in size, but she was large in theatrical.
She was a redhead.
Yeah,
Lucy.
Ball.
Lucille Ball.
Lucille Ball. Well, all right, that kind of material
Yep.
was what Exit Laughing was made up of. And we had a bunch of sailors and GSO girls that performed this on our little stage. And every Sunday night at the Y, I had organized much of the city's philanthropic groups to provide a meal for the sailors, a full-blown meal. And after the meal, we would have entertainment in the hall, which was called Whiteman Hall, and that was every Sunday night we did this. So that was a lot of organization and a lot of fun.
A lot of work.
A lot of work, a lot of planning,
Yeah.
a lot of coordinations, but it all worked well.
Yeah.
And we had a Hammond organ in the Whiteman Hall that was monies from which the Whitemans gave to buy the organ. The organ was a large Hammond, the electronic Hammond organ with good speakers. I've forgotten the names of the speakers that were built into the walls of the room and made great sound when played by people who were volunteers and knew how to use the organ to its fullest. And that was really fun. I conducted sing-alongs with projected words on the screen that we sang robustly with the accompaniment of the Hammond organ. And that was done every week of every month of the year.
Tell the story about the shoes with the hooks on them.
Oh, well, that's regressing a bit, but
It was funny.
my father, well, I liked to entertain at that time, and I asked my dad, who was the mechanic of our home, to create these shoes that I had in mind. The shoe were high-top boot type, or what were they called? Just
High tops.
high tops. And I wanted an eye built into the shoe that would be permanently there. Shoe was no good for any other purpose than this one that I'm describing. And so in the floor of wherever I was, in this case, Whiteman Hall, I would have screw hooks, and you'd screw into the wooden floor these little hooks that I would then place my feet upon with the shoe and hook myself into these hooks. I would then be able to lean, holding the microphone stand, and lean without falling. And that was kind of funny to look at. And in fact, very funny. And
while you're singing.
yeah. And that would fool the audience. They think, oh, how's he doing that? And then, of course, then I'd unhook, really not noticeable, and walk off. And that was kind of fun.
Defying gravity.
Yeah. One time, though, I was at Camp Klassen, it was called, doing this thing for the campers. And to the porch that we were performing on was just cement slab. Well, you couldn't screw the hooks into the cement slab, so we found kind of a door, piece of wood. It was really solid, not a door like you'd have in your home, but a solid fence type door. And we screwed that. Well, a fence door, is okay, long way, but leaning forward, it was kind of short. So you didn't have the benefit of that to help with the illusion. And so, anyway, who was with me? It was probably Tom Chandler, who was a great straight man and who ad-libbed beautifully on whatever situation we were creating. And so I asked him to stand on the door using his weight so it wouldn't tip forward. You could lean left and right, but you couldn't lean forward very far. And so he was standing on the door, and we were rattling on with whatever we were saying. And then in his exuberance and just gesturing, he stepped off of the door. And so I lost his weight and neck control. And I fell forward, literally, with this big plank of wood on my feet, tipped up behind me. Well, it was a great sight and made everybody laugh, but it was not particularly funny because I was hooked to this big slab of wood, and that was the end of that. We didn't do that anymore that summer.
Well, it gave away the gag, but those people must have just died laughing.
Yeah, it was a good humorous bit.
Well, all right, so Wyman Hall. There was a story I remember because I was there witnessing it. There was a period of time he did these great Christmas Eve events at the Big Y.
Well, we did Christmas Eve. I don't know what you're thinking, but in the organization of the program, I asked the volunteer people who were always very generous and welcoming any kind of suggestions I would make. I wanted to hang every kid should have a sock for Christmas. So in our lounge room, which was a great room, we had a big fireplace and a piano. I strung hanging wire around and hung socks, clean men's socks, usually white, around the room. And the same volunteers would provide things to stuff it with, like apples and oranges and fruit of all kind. And then to add to that, we had donations of money that we could turn in at our main desk for change to make phone calls. So we had some of the socks with these little pieces of paper that said free phone call home, redeem at main desk. And so that's what we did. We had maybe $100 or so or more to make phone calls. And the servicemen would just choose a sock and keep it for their own use. We had matching socks that were not hung. So they had a pair of socks, free phone call, and of course all the goodies that were in the socks. And that was what we did for Christmas Eve.
There would seem to be a couple of phone calls you would make on stage.
Yeah, well, that was part of the program. We would do almost every week. We would have cards filled out by the servicemen. They're knowing that if drawn, their card would allow them a call. So as an evening progressed, part of the program activity was to fill out the card, deposit the card in a vessel that one of the girls, GSO girls, would draw, and if you were that lucky person, you could come and make a phone call. Well, I had a phone booth, a real phone booth, one that the telephone company gave me, where you could go inside with the phone, our phone, and make the call. But the gimmick was we could broadcast in the room both sides of the conversation. Well, the GSO girl that I had chosen would dial the number as off the card that was given or selected, and introduce to whomever answered the phone what was going on. Your son, blah, blah, has been chosen to make this phone call, and would say whatever she would say. Well, the funniest one was Linda Johnson, who said, hello, Miss. She's a very outspoken and outgoing girl and could just ad-lib herself to heaven. And she introduced herself to the mother of this young man as, oh, we're engaged, and thought you would like to hear whatever his name was, his comment. And so that made everybody, and they're hearing both sides of the conversation over the loudspeakers in the room. So that was another one of my gimmicks to make the evening fun. And that went on for several years.
You have to remember that telephone long distance back then was terrible price.
It was more expensive than it is now. Today it's cheap.
Yeah, back then it was a rare gift to talk to.
Yeah.
So these guys would be coming off a ship to give reference to. They would come off a ship and not have communication with their parents for a year.
Or less, but anyway, the young man would be given his privacy in the phone booth and allowed to speak as long as he wanted to. And we were giving him that time, which was costly, but we had the money to do it with at that time.
Yeah, it was fun. And then you broadcast it.
Yeah, over just PA system.
Yeah, that was fun. Yeah, and some of them were emotional because they hadn't spoken to their parents in a while. It was Christmas.
Yeah, it was all good timing and good programming.
Yep. How did you know when you wanted to pick the entertainment field for work? And, you know, how did you know that you wanted to pick the YMCA and the production side of the YMCA, the directing? How did you know that?
Well, in my young days, when I was the sailor in San Diego, I went to an armed services Y in that town, and they had a similar, but not as elaborate, program in which they had local people entertain the servicemen of that area. And I think it was Sunday nights. And then also I wanted, as I had chosen the Y as a vocation, I wanted to work with the adult, young adult civilians, and not like the Y is today, who limits. They have children's program, but they kind of mess around with the young people from the teenagers or college age through adults, to adults. And that age group was kind of missing. So I wanted to do that. And I educated myself.
Then you went to
George Williams.
got your master's.
And then I went to work in Long Beach.
Yep.
Married Sue, and there we are. Now, where do you want to go?
How did you find Long Beach from Chicago?
Long Beach had an armed services Y,
Okay.
and then Mr. George McLean was looking for a program director.
Okay, and you knew about that from Chicago?
Yeah, they had notices of employment,
Okay.
and so that all just happened to be available, and I made application for that position, and George chose me for an interview, and
Wow.
and that's how I got there.
No, that's really good. Because how many thousands
I don't
of
know.
sailors?
1,000 sailors
Yeah.
came through Long Beach.
Well, through the Y at Long Beach.
Oh, I wouldn't know. It's a lot because there were a lot of ships based in Long Beach at that time.
Yeah. And how many years were you there?
Oh, biggest part of 20.
You met Mom, you moved to El Jardín, and you started having kids. Let's kind of transition into raising kids a little bit. So you had me, you had...
You were 1959,
Yep.
and then when was Amy born?
61.
Then Amy was born in 61. You all, and then there was
Chris.
I have no, what's his birth?
64-ish. 63.
63?
Yeah, ish. It was Christmas time.
Yeah, it was. It was December 26th.
Yep.
Can't get much closer.
And then at least 9 years younger than me, so that would be like 68.
And those were the dates. And you all, were raised on El Jardín in Long Beach. Went to the schools that we have mentioned, all of you. You all went to Wilson High School, graduated there. Your names are on some plaque in the courtyard there as all brothers, sisters graduating. And
So what made you think of having so many kids? I mean,
well, I don't think we have too many.
But you didn't really plan on it; it just kind of came.
Well, Sue was an only child. I had one sister, and we wanted our Putney name to continue, which hasn't happened, but as far as your lives are concerned, and Christopher and yourself
Yeah.
are the Putney heir apparents, and that's about it on that.
So, tell us some of the stories about us growing up. You, I mean, I remember going to the Y with you, but I did that for years.
Well, you went down on the weekends with me,
Yep.
where we just continued to conduct the program, and I got you helping run the film cameras, and I don't know what else you did.
I hung out with the janitor sometimes,
And Mrs. Stamper
Mrs. Stamper,
was the lady who worked in our little
the kitchen.
program kitchen
Yeah.
and putting out and helping the volunteers with the refreshments.
Yeah.
And you helped that way, making coffee and serving. We were always serving food, and that was donated by the many volunteers that we had. And just helping with the program that was ongoing, almost hourly events throughout the week and weekend particularly.
Yeah. And then the motorhome, vacation time.
Do you recall when we bought the motorhome?
Not buying it. I don't remember buying it, but I remember taking trips in it.
Well, somewhere along the line, after marriage and some kids, Dodge, I can't remember
Dodge.
what was the Dodge,
Monaco.
what was the company name?
Oh, yeah, Dodge, downtown Long Beach. I forget.
Okay, Dodge agency in Long Beach. We always had Dodge cars, and so the salesperson at this company, which is now slipped both of our heads, said you ought to consider a motorhome, and Dodge had a motorhome, Travco, I think,
Travco.
and it was a fiberglass motorhome with on a Dodge chassis, a Dodge truck chassis, and it was self-contained, had toilet and cooking facilities and bunk beds, and that was about it, and a shower. And so we kept it for years. I don't know, maybe 10 or 15 years or more, and used it on weekends and spontaneous little overnighters. We used it for entertaining some of our guests by going out having supper and drinks and just along the shorelines of Southern California.
I remember Laguna Beach trips.
Yeah, that would be a weekender. The Laguna Beach it was not a brief ride down the coast in the motorhome. We had a particular spot that we liked. It was along a coastline at Laguna, and we would have lunch, and you kids could go out in your bathing suits along the shoreline into a peaceful cove that had the surf coming in, and you could play in the water and just enjoy that summer sun and all that. And then we come back to the motorhome, hose off and get cleaned up and be at peace there. It was great.
That was. And then we went to O'Neill Park a couple times, Costa de Caza.
Yeah, which was down the coast further than Laguna.
That was before Costa de Caza got developed.
Yeah, it was a little more primitive at that time than Laguna. And Atsons, didn't the Atsons have some contact there?
I think they had the first condos down there.
And the kids of Atson were Jennifer and John, and his name was Terry. And what was the lady's name?
Jen, was she a Jen also? I forget.
Anyway, we would go in the motorhome and play and camp out and have the convenience of the home for motorhome for food and potty and recreation. It was nice. The motorhome was a good investment for us. Then I sold it to a guy named Sincola.
That's right.
He cut the motorhome in half and took the top part off and made it like kind of convertible, but it didn't convert back to its original shape. It just stayed open. Sencola had lots of money and was a developer of property, so he would haul his workmen around in this cut-off motorhome. It was very convenient for him. The motorhome ran for maybe 30 years.
Yeah. Had a great engine on it.
It was a truck engine, pretty simple. It had a transmission that you didn't have to shift. It was, what was it called, an automatic. We went across country, and I went on several conferences, one in Colorado and Estes Park. And
Yeah, do you go to the YMCA in the Rockies near Estes Park?
yes, you took us there, I think.
I took you there, but I mean, you went there during the conference
Yes, with the motorhome.
with the motorhome.
Conducted songs for the conference by Song Slide, which was a good joy. We had, regressing a bit now, we had good accompanists. Had Eleanor Skelton, who could play the piano. I liked it. Could play in any key, and so she went with me to one of these conferences where I led the songs for the YMCA folks who attended the conference. And that was a great occasion. And then we had Mae Marshall and Joe Marshall. I have a book over there written by Joe, who was a great ad-libbing entertainer type who loved to tell stories and jokes. And then his wife was the Hammond organist, and who played well. So we used those people. They were all volunteers. None of them got paid. Eleanor worked at the desk, main desk, which is the heart of our building, where all transactions of money and information took place. But May was a total volunteer. So what else?
So then you took the motor home. So you did the YMCA in the Rockies, and then you took the motor home to. Did you go to Chicago with it? Is that right? For another conference?
Let's see, Chicago.
Or did you just fly to Chicago?
I think I just flew.
Okay.
We took the motorhome back to my home in Oklahoma City,
A couple times.
where you got a haircut.
Yeah.
We had movies of that
Yeah.
by grandmother, my mother, your grandmother, and you had your little boy locks still at that time.
She used these
Big-
shears.
Big scissor type devices, because we didn't have any barber clippers at that time. But she always cut my hair as a child, so you were in good hands.
And then we went to Bick's house, where Aunt Jerry lived, Kent and Raylan. We went to their house a couple times.
That was in Oklahoma City.
Yep.
It was the house that Dad had built.
Oh, really?
Now that was he built all the homes of our family.
So he built that big house?
It was a brick house, that one.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Wow. That's where Jerry and Bick lived?
Yes.
With the attic and the big roof?
I don't know what house you're thinking of.
Oh, shoot. It was like a corner house. Yeah, I think the driveway area was on a cul-de-sac. Do you remember that?
I remember a house that wasn't two-story.
It wasn't two-story.
It was on the corner,
Yep.
spread out a bit,
Yeah, it was like a ranch style.
and
Had a big lawn.
big front yard because of the corner.
Mm-hmm. Your dad built that one?
Yes.
Wow. That was a nice house. That was very modern for that era.
Yeah.
I remember we were in the motorhome and there was a tornado warning on the way in. It was a bad rainstorm.
Yeah. I remember that. We made it through.
We made it through. We didn't even know there was a tornado warning. We just knew there was a big storm. But when
We knew that the rain was just by the wind and the rain
yeah,
coming down on the motorhome, it was pretty severe
yeah,
driving.
yeah. We just moved to inch along. How did you come up with the first and middle names for us?
Let's see.
So, Cree Harrison.
Well, Harrison is a family name.
Yep.
My father's name is Harrison, Orange Harrison, and O.H. And who else? What else?
And then Cree Harrison.
Well, Harrison is
And then you got Harrison Hubbard. So
what?
that name keeps pushing forward.
Well, as I just said,
Yeah.
Harrison is a family name coming from, my side, and just wanting to maintain that name.
Then,
I like the double syllables.
sure. And then we have Amy Sue.
Susan. Yeah, Sue. Susan, I think.
Amy Susan.
Amy Sue. Yeah, Susan. And that's the same reason.
That was after Mom.
Yeah.
And then Elisa Ray for Redland.
No, just Elisa Ray. not for Raylin, even though I named Raylin, because Jerry, my sister, the mother of Raylin, suggested that I think of a name for the forthcoming child. Well, double names, Betty Sue, Betty Lee, Betty Jane, were quite popular back in Oklahoma. And I personally didn't want her to be two names. And so I suggested Ray Lynn, Raelyynn. So it was not two different names.
Right. And then Christopher Allen.
Right. Those are. Allen is not after or for anyone that's in our family. It was just a double syllable first name, Christopher, and then a short name, Allen.
Cool. So then what made you think of doing you can't really say they're adoption, because we're not officially adopting, but I know there was a period of time where you were taking in students for exchange.
Well, it was financial. At that time, we wanted to, and we had the capacity, emotional and physically, of having other people in our home.
Yep.
And then we needed to support you and other people financially. So this was an income available through the school. Let's see, what was it?
CSULB, Cal State Long Beach.
Yeah, but it was a program.
Yep.
There, like foreign student,
Yep.
or I don't recall the name of the program, but had financial assistance for taking in and offering your home to these students. And that was the reason.
Back then, with the student part.
Mm-hmm.
So then we got burned out with the student relationship, and you got David, because he came through school, or through church, St. Luke's.
Yeah. David Miller came through a psychologist woman at St. Luke's who was in East LA, or had a practice including East LA, in which a person there had David Miller as a child. And so she was looking for some family to take David into their home. And so we held up our hand and said, we will. We had an empty bed, as we had all you kids, and then you had gone. And we had all these kids and beds, which were not filled, and so we said we would. And so we did. And David came about 14 years old. He came with some built-in problems. His mother was an uneducated lady, German heritage, rather stubborn, and who had David, I presume, out of wedlock, and the father was not present of David. And anyway, so David was growing up kind of on his own, and with a mother who was very dear and loving, but just not capable of taking care of a young adolescent kid, and in East LA, and the East LA climate was full of gangs and street kids that were just not supervised and had there was not much control on their behavior. So the school the teachers of the school that David attended, we met with, I got a cough, and so they said, "Oh, please take him. He has potential." And so we did. Church St. Luke's, which we were actively involved in, knew of our intention. And David's mother, let's see, what was her name? Was not well. She had some kind of internal problems that were developing into a serious condition and was really dying. And so the St. Luke's folks knew all of this going on. And one lady of the congregation said, "I have a burial plot which I'll give you." And so, what was her name? Emma. No, I wish I could remember. I probably can in time. And so, David's mother finally became so ill that she did die and was buried in this plot, which is out near
Hollywood Cemetery, isn't it?
yes.
Under a tree, near a tree.
There's a stadium or...
It's a racetrack and the old Forum.
Okay.
The Forum where the Lakers used to play.
Mm-hmm.
The fabulous Forum, and then the Hollywood Parks racetrack, and then you had the Hollywood Cemetery.
Yes, you're right. Thank you.
It was a nice plot.
Yeah, and that's where David's mother is buried, and St. Luke's was very instrumental in assisting with the service of that occasion.
Yeah.
And then we cosmetically helped David out because David had a bad mouth full of awkward teeth, and so we had braces on his teeth, and which improved his appearance quite a bit. And then later we took on Roy. Roy, different story. Roy's mother and father were married, and Roy is probably his father, which I have never met, was a serviceman, and Roy is just a totally different person than David in personality. Didn't have much baggage. He came pretty open and amenable in his childhood, and so they all went to Wilson and received their high school education there, And so Roy is a lean type person even to this day. He wanted to become a cosmetologist and went to school for that purpose, and now is a beautician of his own and works in a shop that he doesn't own but says he will someday, and makes very good money and has a nice personality and a clientele that enjoys his work and his personality. So he never wants for people. We were visiting recently, and he has a date book to keep his clients straight, and they're all by appointment. And he has a cell phone that he uses as his communication, and it was constantly on and busy. And he was working out appointment dates and times for these people that would come to his shop, and he'd do his thing. So and David works for Rogers Gardens, which is a large, very exclusive garden shop in Orange County somewhere. And he is the advertising exec for that establishment, which has a good-sized budget for advertising. And he places the ads, makes the ads, and places them in rather exclusive magazines. So they're all working and successful people, including yourself. Clovis Putney got his interest in running cameras and putting things together through my interest of doing slideshows and putting stories together by visual and audio means, which is what we're doing now. So all our kids are successful individuals in their own right, and we, Sue and I, love them very much.
So slideshows, you were just talking about slideshows. You made your first slideshow with the YMCA.
Well,
how did you come up with that idea?
Well, slides are easy to produce. Eastman Kodak had slide film, and if you had a good camera and you had an idea, you could gather the slides without much cost or high cost, and then soon you would have an accumulation of thousands or hundreds, certainly, of slides. Now, what do you do with them? Well, there's always occasions in do good work, schools, teaching, and related vocations to recognize individuals or people or groups of people in some way. So doing a slideshow about the subject of whatever you wanted was an easy task. So slides would be organized and projected, and then you need a soundtrack of music or commentary or both to accompany the slides. So that became audio visual, and audio-visual was a subject I liked doing. And then because a single projection upon a screen is kind of limited and non-dimensional, I wanted to add more projecting equipment. Well, the technology of that time was also growing, and the technology, you had controlling devices that were could trigger the various projectors on commands, usually electronic. But I began before that happened. I would do it manually, and so it just grew from one projector, two projector, three projector, four, and so then he had these multiple projectors. I got up to about 9 projectors, and it could have gone on, and it did by other people. But it got kind of silly when some of the producers of the time would take motion picture and cut the frames apart and put them in projectors and then project it, as fast as they could. And I thought that was a little dumb. So I never did that, but I liked the multiple projectors because it kept the audience viewing whatever you were doing rather involved, and you could project them in different spaces, and so the people then would turn their heads and be observant to what you were doing, which kept them awake and interested in the subject. So that's how we became involved in multiple projections. I had several different kind of controlling gadgets that were good and bad. One was a tape. One device was a tape which you punched holes in the tape. This was a metal type tape, and it would run over a head that responded to a pulse and moved the metal tape forward, and then it would trigger, and the hole was there. The trigger would open a circuit that caused the projector to move. Well, that was one of the first ones, and then it became electronic more by impulse, a high-pitched note.
So, tell me about the YMCA slideshow, A Time.
Well, that was one of my most elaborate. That was for a conference of some place, somewhere. I created this multiple projector which had motion picture within it, slideshow, motion picture combined, and I called it A Time. The soundtrack, I always pride myself in the soundtrack, and because the soundtrack could stand alone outside of no projector at all, and you just listen to the soundtrack and it would convey a good message. Well, we had a recording studio in Long Beach that was created by Ralph Garrison in the beginning. And I worked for Ralph during my spare time from the Y and ran the shop, his studio, when they went away, which they traveled the world often, and I would run their studio. Well, as time went on and they grew older and less interested in maintaining the studio, and I was growing away from my work at the Y. He says, "I'll sell you the studio," and we were capable of buying it at that time. So I bought the studio and stayed in its location on Pine Avenue, Long Beach, for about a year after that, and then found a place on East Anaheim, a building that was unoccupied, and it was a rectangular shaped building, all stucco, and it had few windows in it, and a big front that had a overhead door in the front of the building. And so we moved there. It was totally undeveloped. It was totally not fixed as a studio. So a lot of work and quite a bit of money. Greg Killingsworth was active in my life at that time, and he was a good hammer and saw man, and I had helped him on many of his projects. So he was willing to help me make this place a studio. And so we built all the things in the building, within the building, making it a studio. And it was a good functioning place. I moved all of Ralph Garrison's equipment, which was Ampex sound equipment, a big voice of the theater speakers, and moved them into this building and made it a very functioning. It was large enough to hold large groups. I had Wilson High School bands, their choral program, which was good, and I recorded often the schools of that area because of the size within the building. And the studio had lathe equipment. Ralph made the acetate disc for the acetate discs were used for mastering sound that needed to be duplicated by making the disc into what are they called? Stampers and the vinyl disc of the time. 33s and 45s were made of vinyl materials, and so they could be played on phonographs of that period. And so we were able to do that, fabricate that work, which was very good work for that studio of that time. Now it's all completely digital. And so we just stayed there in the studio throughout the period of vinyl, and until everything electronic became digital, and we were just kind of obsolete at that finally. And so that's the progress of the studio.
So you made a couple of slideshows. You've got a relationship with the Port of Long Beach.
Well, yeah. Long Beach Port was an active client for me. I had a regular income from my work with the port, and a young man named Steve Sato was in the public relations department of the port, and so when there was a need to convey through this audio-visual process to their clients, I was called upon often to create it. And so it was both, it was mostly TV at that time, video at that time. And so I would do that work. They had a large auditorium which could project video and upon the screen, a large screen. And they had a power, I've forgotten what the projector was called, but it was a big, hunky thing. To project video was quite elaborate at that period. And so the work of audiovisual was good for me and interesting because I liked the mechanics of it and the creativity of it. So it was a good program of work.
There was a client you had, Starkist.
Well, that was simply another client, like the Port of Long Beach, who wanted someone to produce for them on their subject material, which was tuna fish. And so you got to travel a little with their thing. They were marketing their products constantly, and they were, a man named Tom Stanford was their marketing man, who I knew personally at church, St. Luke's, and he lived near where we lived in Park Estates. So it was a good relationship in that respect.
I remember you got Charlie the Tuna. You produced Charlie the Tuna to talk towards the employees.
Well, they had Charlie the Tuna before I did. I just used the figure that had been created by some ad agency to be the spokesperson for whatever was required of us through Tom's endeavors, and he became just a spokesperson.
And Morris the Cat.
All those characters that some ad agency had created. I didn't create those figures.
No, but you reused them.
Yeah. And I would take the footage of Charlie the Tuna, which was an animated figure, and his mouth would just kind of move without forming real words. So it was easy to use the figure, which was kind of just moving jaws up and down and saying different things.
And then Morris the Cat didn't have any lips at all.
Yeah, so it was just being creative.
Yeah. So the YMCA and the studio, then you moved here to Los Alamos.
Well, then finally retiring from the work of the Y and the audiovisual business, and we had a large home on, we moved from El Jardín. We had a large home on La Perla in Park Estates. I think 3,600 square feet home, which was large, and a swimming pool on that property. And so Sue and I decided that, the house was too costly to maintain, and we had no real use for it anymore because we had retired or decided to retire from the work that we've been describing, and let's find another place to live. And so we did, and we decided on Northern California, and Sue does not like heat, and it couldn't be the desert or a high desert or anything related to heat. And we came up to mid California, Central California, San Luis Obispo, and a little village outside of San Luis is called Los Osos, and the bears, Osos bear, and it's near the water. The bay is very close to us, and it's cool. The prevailing winds are more than often off of the water, so we have 70-degree temperatures most of the time. So it's an ideal place weather-wise to live. And so we did. We found a place in Los Osos, which had income property existing on the property site, which made it ideal. You had a little income you could rent it out, the property. Had a studio apartment, and so the bedrooms of the main house were 2, and the studio made 3. So it became an ideal place, and here we are.
Yep. Like a resort out here. So, Amy wants to ask, what are the 10 most important things a person should do while on their time here on Earth?
Who's that? Amy?
Amy's asking that. So what are the 10, what
10.
you would say? You don't have to give 10, but what are the...
I've given.
You've given hundreds, yeah. But what would you say, looking back in your life?
Well,
highlights of a person's value on Earth.
Well, to remain healthy throughout your life is very important, and never participate in anything excessive. You can overeat, overdrink, you can just excess on anything that would be detrimental to your life and your body. I hope you can edit all that out.
It's okay.
So being healthy, and then after health would be happiness. Be happy about yourself, and positive, being always a positive person, which I think I've been most of my life, and never a negative person.
Yeah.
And enjoying your life because you're healthy and you're happy and you're positive. Those are the major things. And taking on responsibilities that you don't know how to solve at the moment you take them on. So you have to be experimental within the confines of your abilities.
So a little bit of risk.
Yes, do a little bit of unknown things, which we did when we took on the 2 children, 2 boys, which have turned out very positive, but the risk of taking that responsibility on was quite profound in the beginning. So
Yeah. What about love?
Well, love, the love of your companion, which is Sue, and we share, I would say, 90% or 99 and 8/10% of the same thing. So you need to have that uh, with your companion. We enjoy much of the same things. We enjoy good music, good drama, good theater, and in San Luis, they have a symphony, SLO, SLO, San Luis Obispo Symphony, and their season is fairly short and is about to start. They will give, I think it's 5 performances in the season, and we go to every one of them for at the time of they rehearse. They rehearse and invite public in. So they rehearse what they're going to perform in the evening that same day, but we see it at the rehearsal, which is very informal, and the director, Michael Kovac, is very capable conductor, and he's teaching you all the way. He will choose what they're going to perform, some classical music, and he will discuss it with you openly, and then conduct the orchestra. And if there's something that he wants to correct, he stops it, corrects it while you're viewing all of this, and often discuss why he stopped the orchestra, and then correct to the orchestra, he would say, correct whatever was the reason for stopping, and would turn around and, now isn't that better? He would say, and then we would all say, yeah. So that's the kind of experience we like. We enjoy the theater of young people at colleges. There are Cal State, there's Cal Poly here in this area, and there's Cuesta, which is a junior college, and there's some civilian non-student type amateur performances going on, and we try to see those that interest us. So we don't lack for the cultural events. We have a dog named Charlie, and Charlie is a rescue dog. We went to the shelter in this area for animals and found Charlie there, and he found us. And so Charlie is a Labrador mix of some kind, and he's brown, so Charlie Brown is a perfect name for him. So
that's great. So we talked about health, happiness,
love,
companionship. I know we're wrapping up. She said top 10 important things a person should do. How about doing? What kind of do's do you think? Outside of yourself, what do you think you should leave behind?
Oh, when I die?
Well, not stuff, but during your life, what do you think you did? Or what do you have as advice advice to doing for people?
Well,
Like you affected thousands of lives.
Well-
That's a do.
well, by being consistent in what you do as work,
Yep.
and the work I did was at the Y, military Y, and leaving that, there is a reunion of some of these people who attended the Long Beach Armed Services Y annually, which is, and the people that attend that, and we have attended as well, are people that I don't even know.
Yeah.
And so they attend because they had such good and positive experiences when they were children, or when they were young people, young sailors mostly, at the and remembering the activities that they participated in, and that I organized as a program director. So that leaving that behind, and that could be done as a school teacher, as a
Doctor.
yeah, and as a person who, if you were a Boy Scout leader, you know, you could do it in many different ways of affecting.
Good parent.
Yeah, as a father, being positive, as we said, with your children, teaching your children by good experiences, new experience, being open about their ideas. I would like to do, the kid would say, well, do it. I don't know how. Well, let me help you know how. And just allowing the exercise of the child.
Make a journey out of it together.
Mm-hmm.